Ah, country living. Fresh air, wide open spaces, and all that pure, clean water. One of the best things about country living is being able to tap into the best source of water available. Naturally filtered groundwater. This water came from a well. Cheers. Now, I know it's safe because this water is tested regularly, but just because water came out of the ground, you can't take the quality of well water for granted. I mean, all living things depend on water for their health, so the cleaner the better. The health of your family, your neighbors, even the environment depends on it. Do you know who's responsible for your well? Well, you are. From hiring a licensed well contractor to maintaining an existing well to ensuring that any old wells on your land are properly plugged and sealed, the responsibility is all yours because it's your well. Today, I'm going to show you how to protect your water supply and the supply of others who tap into the aquifer. But don't worry about memorizing everything I say. At the end of this video, we'll provide you with a list of organizations that you can contact for help. So sit back, relax, and let us make you well aware. To understand why it's so important to be well aware, let's start by talking about groundwater. It's the source of your well water. Groundwater obtained through private wells is a vital resource for nearly all of Ontario's rural residents and many cottagers. In many cases, it's the sole source of water for drinking, washing, irrigation, livestock, many businesses. Well, you get the picture. But where does it come from? Groundwater is a major component in the water cycle. It's also called the hydrologic cycle. Here's how it works. Water is constantly circulating from the Earth's surface up into the atmosphere and then returning back down again as rain or snow. Some of this precipitation seeps into the earth, filling the cracks and open spaces in and between rocks and soil, and becomes groundwater. These saturated layers below the water table are called aquifers, and that's what your well taps into. They're not vast underground lakes or rivers. Groundwater also benefits natural ecosystems because it discharges into streams, rivers, wetlands, and lakes. From there, it returns to the atmosphere and the hydrologic cycle starts all over again. Groundwater is always moving, but unlike water on the surface, it moves very slowly. Would you believe it's even moving through this rock? If you look here, you can see it's wet here. There's another wet spot here because the water is making its way through tiny little cracks in the bedrock. Typically, groundwater flows at rates that vary from a few millimeters to a few meters per day, depending on the surrounding environment. When groundwater becomes contaminated, it can take a long time for the contamination to show up at your well. That means it's also a very long time before the groundwater can be restored to its original condition. Now, you can't have a well without the groundwater, so the first thing you need to do is find out about your local groundwater conditions. How do you do that? Fortunately, there are more than 500,000 water well records on file, so that's a good place to start. They contain a lot of information that'll help you locate good groundwater in your area. Also, many municipalities across Ontario are mapping their groundwater resources.
We have information on the groundwater resources within our office and also on the county's website. And this information pertains to the bedrock aquifers, the shallow, intermediate, and deep aquifers, and where they're located throughout the county. And also the consultants, when we undertook our regional groundwater study, did a vulnerability assessment of each aquifer to determine its vulnerability or susceptibility to contamination from surface activities. We have also compiled information on bedrock geology, quaternary geology, superficial sands and gravels, soils in the area that can help and assist a well driller in determining the best spot to drill a well. We've also undertaken a potential contaminant inventory that provides information on previous or pre-existing uses throughout the county that could cause or could lead to contamination of either private or municipal wells. And this information also is available from our office and on our website. So you might be interested in knowing whether there was a petroleum or oil gas well abandoned within the area, and that may affect your choice of where you locate your well.
Some sites are more sensitive than others, so try to get as much information as possible about your area. You're lucky, Ontario has world-class experts in all aspects of groundwater resource development, protection, and water well construction. First, talk to your municipality or a licensed well contractor to find someone who can provide advice about the geology and the groundwater resources in your area. Then, it's on to the next step. Location, location, location. The site you choose for your new well will affect the quality of the water and the future performance of that. But how do you choose the best spot? Hire a licensed well contractor, someone who has experience in your area and who's up to date with well regulations and minimum construction standards. Ask to see your licensed well contractor's credentials. The person who owns the business must have one of these, a license from the Ministry of the Environment. So should the people who construct the well, those who install the pumps, even those who plug the old wells.
The most important things for people to consider is to make sure the person they hire is licensed by the Minister of the Environment. It's also very important that they understand that the minimum construction standards in the regulation are there to protect their family's water supply. They should also be aware that once they take possession of the well, they are required to maintain it properly to make sure it gives them and their family generations of good, safe drinking water.
Some potential sources of contamination include fuel tanks, storage tanks, septic systems, manure piles, livestock, your driveway, stockpiles of chemicals, and garden or tool sheds where pesticides are stored. Depending on the type of well, it needs to be at least 15 to 30 meters away from these and other contaminant sources.
You want to locate your new well as far away from any potential source of pollution that's on your property now, or something that you might do on your property in the future, like add a room to your house, or put a deck in, or extend your sewage system. So you want to maximize the separation distance to minimize the risk to that water supply.
The top of your well must be visible and easy to access for cleaning, testing, monitoring, maintenance, repair, and inspection. When it comes to wells, out of sight, out of mind is not the way to think. Wow, would you look at all this stuff? There's a lot more to a well than just a hole in the ground. These are all the parts that go into a newly drilled well. Now, I'll be talking about them in just a minute, but first things first. Thousands of new wells are constructed every year. That's a lot of wells, and a lot of potential for risk if they're not constructed properly.
The two main types of wells predominantly in Ontario are drilled wells and bored or dug wells. The drilled wells are a smaller diameter, usually go deeper into the aquifers. The bored or dug wells are shallow, and they take their water usually from a surface type water source, the first aquifer that's encountered, and they work on an infiltration method. The dug or bored wells are more prone to contamination due to the fact of their shallow construction depths, and they're larger diameter, and they work on an infiltration method so that the soil is not able to clean the water as good as it could in a deeper well.
To increase the safety and the security of the water supply, it's recommended that all new wells be drilled and lined with these watertight casings. They keep out the contaminants. They also protect the pumping equipment and the water supply itself. This is the well grout. It acts as a sealant to fill the gap between the drilled hole and the outside of the casing. Provincial regulations require that the gap be sealed to ensure that it's watertight. It's recommended that products such as bentonite clay be used because it expands to fill the gap completely. Without this seal, the outside of the casing acts as a direct pipeline for surface water and other contaminants that can enter the aquifer and your water supply. And this unit, which can be either perforated or slotted, is a stainless steel well screen. It's attached to the bottom of the well casing to filter out sediment and let only the water in. Now, of course, you got to get the water out of the well and up into your house, and that requires a pump. So So you have some choices. Some pumps go down into the well itself. Here's a couple of examples of that style. Or you could have the pump up here on the surface, like this one, and it can go right inside your house. Submersible pumps are connected to the surface by a plastic or steel pipe to bring the water up into your house, and waterproof electric cables to provide power for the pump. This little gadget is called a pitless adapter, and it eliminates the need for a pump house at the top of your well. To prevent surface water contamination, it's required that the well casing extend at least 40 centimeters, that's about 1.5 feet, above the finished ground level of the elevated area that surrounds the well. After construction is complete, the well is capped. A commercially manufactured well cap must be securely fitted to prevent entry of foreign materials like surface water and bugs. Remember, if it can fall into your well, it can get into the aquifer and even into your drinking water. Ugh. Within 2 weeks of the well being constructed, your licensed well contractor must provide you and the province with a copy of the water well record. This record indicates how the well was built, its location, and the results of the pumping test. This information is really important. It's like a blueprint for your house. So keep it in a safe place. In fact, it's a good idea to make copies of this for each time that your well gets serviced, which leads us to our next section. Along with proper location and construction, your well also needs regular preventative maintenance to ensure a long and trouble-free life. I mean, after all, you probably service your car every spring and fall. At least you're supposed to if you don't want it to break down. Well, you should do the same thing with your well. Rather than wait until something goes wrong, prevent the problem from happening in the first place. Start with a close look at your well. The area around it should be clear of any potential contaminants, like this can of gasoline. Sure, it's just sitting here right now minding its own business, but suppose it gets knocked over. All that fuel just spills into the ground. 1 liter of gasoline contaminates 1 million liters of groundwater. So if you need to gas up your lawnmower or other fuel-driven equipment, don't do it anywhere near your well. You know, it boggles the mind what some people do around their wells, like spread fertilizer, spray pesticides, even tie their dog's leash to the well cap. What were they thinking? So once you're satisfied that the area around your well is okay, and here there are still some issues like this garden that's too close, but once you've checked all that, take a close look at the well itself. And if it's an older well, make sure that the cap isn't cracked or damaged or, in this case, completely missing. If it is, it needs to be repaired or replaced right away. Also make sure there aren't any problems with the sealant around the well casing.
This well has a problem here with the hole around the outside of the casing, which the surface water could get down and contaminate it. It hasn't been properly grouted, and it'll get down and contaminate the aquifer and contaminate the household here and contaminate the neighboring properties as well.
The pump will eventually wear out, so you need a licensed pump installer to give your well some mechanical attention, and that's also a good opportunity to do a thorough inspection of all aspects of your well. Whether your well is old or new, you should always be on the lookout for any changes in the water quality. If it smells, tastes, or even just looks different, then you should have it tested in a lab. The experts there can often find things that you'd miss if you did a self-test.
I had no idea there was anything wrong with our water until the test results came back, and we had an unacceptably high number of coliform and E. coli.
You can't always taste, smell, or see bacteria or other contaminants. That's why the province recommends that you test for bacteria at least 3 times a year. If you need information about conducting well water sampling, contact your local health unit. A sampling kit that provides detailed instructions is available.
When you get your water report back, you will see that there are two parameters identified, E. coli and coliforms. And they separate those two parameters for a very important reason. The source of the contamination is quite different. If you have E. coli present in your drinking water, in your well, it means that you are being impacted upon by fecal material. And that could be from your own septic system, or it could be from somebody spreading manure near your well. So that's really important because E. coli will cause disease. Coliforms, on the other hand, are naturally occurring in plants and animals and soil. Having coliforms in your well at a very low level doesn't necessarily indicate a negative impact on human health. But there are some coliforms that do cause problems, and that's why you need to look for both when you monitor water in your well. Don't take your well water for granted.
The public health inspector at your local health unit can help you interpret the results of your tests. If there is a problem with your water, it's always best to conduct a visual inspection of your well first. If the source of the problem can't be detected, bring in a licensed well contractor right away to identify the source of the problem and eliminate it. You can save yourself a lot of money by doing this instead of rushing out to buy a home treatment device that may be expensive to install, operate, and maintain. And it may not eliminate the source of your trouble.
I think the problems we had were caused by the garden that I planted around the well. I mean, the well isn't an attractive thing, and I thought flowers would look nice, and it wasn't a good idea. I've contacted the Ministry of Environment, and they have a list of licensed well contractors, and I've gotten in touch with someone from the list, and they're coming out to have a look at our well, and we'll discuss our plans.
Now, of course, a well provides water, but it's also a direct pathway to the aquifer that it's tapped into. Now, sometimes a well is no longer needed, or maybe it doesn't meet construction or location standards, so the owner stops using it and maintaining it. Like this one. The cap has a lock on it, but not doing much good. An unused well that hasn't been filled and sealed properly poses health and safety hazards for animals and humans, especially children. It also puts the aquifer and potentially your neighbor's water quality at risk. When you get a new well, you have to plug and seal the old one. If you have a well that's gone dry, if you have one you're not using or it's not being maintained for future use, or if it's producing undrinkable water, then it's time to retire that well and plug and seal it properly.
It's not easy to plug your own well due to the depths that are involved, the diameters, and the nature of the geological materials. If the proper materials are not installed and it's not done according to MOE regulations, it'll end up costing you a lot more in the end.
An improperly plugged well is filled with sand, gravel, stones, construction debris, lumber, or garbage. Improper materials that won't prevent the flow of water or natural gases. Because it's on your property, it's your responsibility to see that an unused well is filled and sealed properly.
Property owners are required to maintain or plug each and every well on their property. If they are not maintaining a well for use, they must plug it. If a well is not properly plugged, it poses a significant risk to the aquifer and the environment. Anyone that is hired to plug a well must also be licensed by the Ministry of the Environment.
So you see, there are plenty of ways for you to become more well aware than you are now. As long as your well is properly sited, constructed, and maintained, it'll meet the needs of you and your family and protect the groundwater for years and years. We all have a responsibility to ensure that our drinking water is safe. It's vital to be proactive for the sake of your family and the community. So take action now. Take responsibility to protect your well and the water supply. After all, your health and the well-being of your family is well worth it. Cheers.